On the Talkback Show, on the radio, or whatever audiovisual device you choose to use. Welcome to the GBC podcast, where we talk about the Packers and our hometown of Green Bay. We are the official podcast of the Lot 1 tailgate party, which is at Lambeau Field every home game. This is episode 92, created November 18th, 2024. I'm John. I'm in Appleton, Wisconsin. Along with me, Jeff in Minnesota and Neil on the East Coast. Say hello, gentlemen, and tell us what you're drinking.
I am feeling a little bit not in the mood for winter weather coming, so I'm thinking about being at sea. I'm having a Big Oyster Brewing 5 Knots Session IPA.
Good evening, gentlemen. Tonight I'm having from Microphone Brewing One Man Wrecking Machine. So whether that's KGB, whether it's Josh Jacobs, Christian Watson, we had lots of wrecking machines against those Bears.
And I'm having a strawberry margarita. You can find us on YouTube and Twitter at Green Bay Chat and Facebook at the GBC Podcast Green Bay Chat. Just the audio is available on Apple Podcasts as well as Spotify by searching for Green Bay Chat. Well, it was Bears week. Packers come away with a victory 20-19. We'll talk about that. And we're going to have 2 upcoming games here with San Francisco and Miami and the short week next week. So that means 2 chances for tailgating in Green Bay, and we'll take a look at the Packers' history, at least with the San Francisco 49ers. But to kick things off, a win is a win is a win. Walking away from it like you're the king of the world, probably not the best choice, but as Coach LaFleur said, he's not going to apologize for winning a game in this league. There's probably a lot of other things that this Packer team could or should be apologizing for this week.
It was a wildly disjointed performance, both by the offense and by the defense. There were parts where our offense in particular looked spectacular, and then there were parts where we couldn't get away from our own feet. And you just started out on that first drive. The Packers go down, score. They don't even have a single third down on that drive. And Jeff texted us and said, it's going to be a day. Well, it was a day, but not quite as straightforward as it was implied by Jeff's text.
Well, at least the asshats played pretty well. So I guess that's something. But the statistics were all over the place. It was the good, the bad, and the ugly. There were equal opportunity positives, negatives. And what was most disconcerting is that oftentimes throughout the game, the Bears had this thing called hope. And that's what was difficult to kind of see, because I was hoping coming off the bye week that Green Bay would really just get down to business. And like you said, that opening drive was great. And then things got weird right off the bat.
The Bears scored on their first drive as well. And I think that was our preview of the way the game was going. When it's a 3rd and 8, Chicago's in their own 33, and Caleb Williams scrambles 16 yards for a first down. And it's like, oh, shit. There's going to be some play that's required, but this really was the preview of this concern that we've had all season, that when is the defense going to stumble? Is the defense going to show up firing on all of its cylinders, or is the defense going to give a lot of opportunities to the other team that's going to fill us with concern throughout the game?
Well, it was definitely the latter, because this is a defense that against mobile quarterbacks had been very good. They had contained the mobile quarterbacks. They had forced them to, they've had a spy, whatever they had to do. And it's like they either didn't prepare for or didn't think that Williams was going to run.
Yeah, there certainly was something missing on the defensive side. And I know there's a lot of chatter out there about Quay Walker's role in this and what he was or wasn't doing. My concern with the defense through this game was, didn't matter how many people they were rushing, 3, 4, 5, 6, that the strategy of running in a straight line at the blocker doesn't really seem to be very effective. Somebody's got to have a swim move. Somebody's got to have a step and a counter. Somebody's got to have some hip shake, a spin, something. Make something happen. Run a stunt. Run a guy in and another guy behind. Do something to shake it up. But running everybody straight at the lineman just is not going to work.
Well, and especially when Williams was getting rid of the ball quicker than he pretty much had all season. So they obviously coached him up this week to get rid of the ball faster. They did have 3 sacks, but 2 were back-to-back plays. So just they were not getting there. And unfortunately, there just weren't any passes defensed. The Bears were just kind of going up and down the field.
It's not just that, Jeff, but the time between the sacks. They had the Brenton Cox sack early, and then the 2 sacks late There's 60 plays that happen in between those sacks at the beginning of the game and the end of the game. And it's mind boggling just how ineffective the rush was.
And ineffective. And you'd say, well, maybe they were ineffective because they were spying on Caleb Williams. And that was obviously not the case. Let's just look at Caleb Williams' numbers. 23 of 31, 231 yards passing, 7.5 yards per attempt, and then 70 yards rushing on 9 rushes. Caleb Williams was responsible for over 300 yards of offense for that Chicago's Bears team. And so often it was making these conversions on third down where it was just a short throw into the flat where we didn't have defenders that were ready to cover those receivers. We couldn't get to the quarterback quickly enough. And when they weren't doing that, it was the running game that was beating us down as well, including Caleb Williams' numbers: 34 rushes, 179 rushing yards for the Bears, 2 touchdowns, 5.3 yards per attempt. We weren't stopping them with pass. We weren't stopping them when they were running the ball.
And this was the third highest offensive production for the Bears offense, but the most since week 5. I mean, so this is an offense that had really sucked. I mean, they hadn't scored any points, hoped they wouldn't, but the Packers were going to give up the first touchdown in, 3-4 games. And that happened in the first half. So they got that over with. And so the Packers are down 10-3. But again, hope for the Bears. The fans were behind them. Everybody was excited. And the Packers were just, discombobulated, flat, just seemed like they weren't either ready or prepared.
And on top of that, there were a number of players who just didn't show up. And, there's the simplest thing: is their name even in the stat line? So Eric Stokes only played 4 plays in that game on defense. He had a bigger stat line than Lucas Van Ness, Kenny Clark, and Devontae Wyatt combined with his 1 tackle. I would also add that Christian Watson with 1 tackle had more stat line than those 3 defenders combined. Your front line's not making a difference when they are running all over you and when you're not putting pressure on the opposing quarterback. That's going to be a problem. It's going to put pressure on your D-backs, and especially when you're missing Jair Alexander again, essentially for the entire game.
And the good news on the day is just that this is an ineffectual offense that Chicago has, because Green Bay's defense played so poorly. We talked about this last week, how they just don't score first, and they didn't again. So it's 10 games this season where Chicago doesn't score first. And then as far as touchdowns in the first quarter, they have just 1 game where they've scored a touchdown in the first quarter. Here they get a field goal in that first quarter. The other thing that's interesting about this, as far as our defense goes, we do keep Caleb Williams from throwing a touchdown. So that's, I think, 5 games in a row that he is without a touchdown. On the other side of that, though, we don't intercept him. Jordan Love does throw an interception in this game.
John, I'm going to give you a little bit of pushback on saying that the Bears offense was ineffectual. They were ineffectual in scoring points. They were pretty effective in pretty much everything else. And of all of those Bears drives, 8 plays, 10 plays, 13 plays, 10 plays, 11 plays, 12 plays, and then 7 plays on that last drive that resulted in the missed field goal. And then on third down, they were 9 of 16 on third down, but they went for it on fourth down 3 times. So overall, they had a 12 of 16 success rate on third or fourth down. 75% of the time they got to third down, they converted on either third or fourth down. That is not an ineffectual offense.
Well, it's a high volume. I mean, they run 72 plays compared to Green Bay's 46. Yeah, I think with 72 plays, you're bound to put up those numbers, but
No. They got to 72 plays because we couldn't stop them. We couldn't stop them. 13 plays, 76 yards, 10 plays, 51 yards. We could not stop them.
That's what I mean. The ineffectualness of not getting in the end zone is what saved this Packer team, because this should have been an ugly loss.
Well, the red zone numbers I think that's maybe where you're going, John. So the Bears, even though their third and fourth down numbers were shockingly good, they only made it to the red zone twice. They were 1 of 2 in the red zone, where we were 3 of 5, and those downs and an interception. So again, our offense up and down the field, it's just when we got in the red zone, and this has unfortunately been the case a lot this year as well with our offense, is that, boy, the red zone, it seems to throw us off. We're just not having good success in the red zone.
Yeah, but I think that's partly because we still don't know what we're doing from a play calling perspective. And the offense was disjointed all game. And Christian Watson obviously had a fabulous day, but there are 2 key numbers that I want to focus on. And that is Jaden Reed had 2 receptions. He had the touchdown, After 7:13 left in the first quarter, there were no passes to Jaden Reed after 7:13 left in the first quarter. So last 52 minutes of the game, 0 targets to Jaden Reed. And Romeo Doubs was almost the same thing. He got a first down, 13:35 left in the first quarter. He had a drop early in the second quarter, but nothing in the stat line the last 58 minutes of the game for Doubs. No targets for Doubs in the last 40 minutes of the game. And it's difficult to have a well-balanced offense when you're really only occasionally throwing to those people. And then on the other side, on the one drive that we actually had to punt, we only had the one Daniel Whelan punt in that game. That drive was Jacobs' run, pass to Reed, incompletion to Jacobs, -1 yard run by Jacobs, 6-yard run by Jacobs, and punt. It's basically all Jacobs on that. And I just think that you need to be balancing your offense more. Yes, Jacobs is really good, but it just seems like it becomes very predictable when you've got these drives every now and then that it's all one person and they're not driving all the way down the field.
I like the balance, though, Neil, of passing to Josh Jacobs and letting Josh Jacobs run. I mean, he combines for 134 yards and a touchdown. So there's at least balance. It's just all in one guy.
But again, there were a lot of yards on that first drive. Jacobs was a star on that first drive, but it wasn't all Jacobs on that first drive. And that's the thing. There's just going all the one guy every single play just doesn't seem like it's a winning game plan.
And that happened in the red zone then too, when we turned it over on downs later in the game. Same thing. Like the play calling just got really stagnant. And I think I texted out, I'm like, I want to see some motion here. Like, I don't want to see that freaking wide receiver jet sweep. We're done with that. They tried that once, and that was a disaster. But
yeah, loss of 5 yards. Yeah,
loss of 5 yards. But get some misdirection. Just get some motion back there, because they being the Packers offense has been extremely successful when those calls like that are played. You've got all this talent, and we didn't really see the tight ends at all in this game get involved. That was another thing that was kind of a head scratcher.
Well, Neil, when you talk about kind of always going through Josh Jacobs, you have to wonder what's going on with the backup running backs. I mean, Emmanuel Wilson and Chris Brooks combined for 4 touches for 30 yards. Wilson 2 carries for 17, Brooks 2 catches for 13 yards. And the other thing interesting about that is Chris Brooks had more snaps. He was out there more often than Emmanuel Wilson, but even between the two of them, it's just a smattering of plays. Josh Jacobs really was a workhorse in this game.
Continuing on this issue of play calling, though, we had multiple situations in the game where we were in a really good advanced position and ended up doing nothing or doing worse than nothing on that. And I think the most appalling one was on the drive with the interception, where we had 2nd and 1 at Chicago's 5, go back 5 yards because of an illegal man downfield, the -5 yard run to Reed. All of a sudden, it's 3rd and 11 at the Chicago 16, and that's when the interception happened. And yes, the interception was just due to a bad pass, but you're putting yourself in the position to do a bad pass when you have 2 consecutive backwards plays from a 2nd and 1 at the 5 yard line.
Just fall forward, and you get and you get the first down. Yeah.
Well, the penalty comes first and moves you back, right? And then the poorly executed run to Reed, the only time he attempts a run in the game. And I heard you, Jeff. I know we weren't talking at the moment, but I heard you complaining about that jet sweep type run as well.
They throw at least one of those in a game, and they're just not effective. And that needs to stop.
But now there are a couple of plays in the game where what is effective when you do have Reed in the backfield is there was that misdirection. There were a couple of times where they do fake it to Reed, give it to Jacobs. Jacobs goes up the gut with it. I like that. I like the fact that they can put the 2 guys back there and run that misdirection. I just feel that they need more creativity to work off of that.
And especially in the red zone, that's what I'm asking for. That's what I'm looking for, is those misdirections, because they're certainly capable of running the ball. And it just, you create a little confusion on the line that they're going to have success, but just it seems like it gets so vanilla in the red zone sometimes that it's not effective.
I'd like to see more power in the red zone than finesse, especially, when you're that close, like you said, Neil, on 2nd and 1. And even the touchdown that they do score on the tush push or the love shove, whatever you want to call it, you still are like, I'm not 100% confident in their ability to power this one in.
But then there were the situations where they were further out and they, in theory, were trying to power it in, but they obviously weren't doing enough. And the turnover on downs, that was, again, a Jacobs -1, Jacobs 4, and then the sack for a loss of 1. We had 2 negative plays out of 3 when we had first and goal at the Chicago 8. And, the scramble ended up being, essentially desperation. And, I don't know what, I mean, you can make an argument that they should have kicked the field goal. I think a lot of people have made the argument they should have kicked the field goal. On the other hand, if our defense was as ineffective as it was, we probably did need the touchdown there in theory. So I can understand why LaFleur decided to go for it. But the problem is it shouldn't have been 4th and goal at the 6. From starting out at the 8, we should have had a 4th and short for that potential go-ahead touchdown there.
Especially when there's only 3 total possessions by the Packers in the second half. So these possessions were at a premium in this game. And that was one, where it's just those little mistakes in the red zone. I mean, the other 2 possessions, touchdowns, awesome. But they were really, really fast.
Yeah, the Packers had only 17 total plays in the second half. The Bears beat that in either the third quarter or in the fourth quarter. But going back to the vanilla plays, can we talk about that 2-point conversion attempt as well? That just didn't look like it had any real chance right off the bat. And it's like, oh, come on, we need better play calling in this situation.
Well, slow developing. That was the thing. It just, it wasn't very well executed. And it just seemed like everybody on the field knew what was going to happen. So yeah, you're right. No misdirection.
And the downside of that too is you're at a point where, yes, the analytics say it, but I also felt the feel there. You felt like your offense was finally in control of the line of scrimmage in that series of events, right? And you feel like this should have been a power play, right? You're not working with a lot of real estate to get a slow developing play to work. Just power it in.
Or fake the power and throw it to Tucker Kraft coming off the outside. I mean, either one of those things. But essentially, you've got to be playing off those 2 things so they are afraid of both of them because it's going to make either one of those plays more effective.
Kraft had 1 target, no catches, and just bizarre. That was really disappointing. I mean, when there was opportunity here. But you know what? Love in the second half was perfect.
Well, other than the fact that he only threw 5 times. Yeah, Love was 5 of 5 for 162 yards. Christian Watson, 3 receptions, 133 yards. And the problem is there are only 5 total attempts for Jordan Love in that second half. Yes, there were some big plays, and that obviously was really critical because it seemed that we needed those chunk plays to get really far downfield. But on the other hand, you've got to be able to have more than that number of plays. And in contrast, Caleb Williams, 15 of 19 for 146 yards in his second half. So very different. So about the same number of yards, but a lot more plays. And that goes to the fact that the Bears were able to kill clock essentially relentlessly to prevent us having the opportunity to have too many drives. On that drive, after the Packers failed on downs, Chicago started their own 2 and went on a 7-minute and 2-second drive. It only went 44 yards, but it took 12 plays and took 7 minutes of time. And that was sort of the story, right? That they were basically not going to give us opportunities. That was clearly a strategy for them in the game. And we really had nothing to counter that strategy because our defense couldn't get them off the field.
And then fortunately, once we got the ball back, it took a minute, 18 seconds to score a touchdown. So that pass to Watson, that's exactly what was needed. He had the wherewithal after he caught it to get up and run. I thought maybe he was going to score the touchdown, and it was not probably best that he didn't. Well, but just from a clock management or take some more time off the clock.
Jeff, when you're behind, you don't worry about clock management. You get the fucking lead first, and then you worry about clock management. You don't deal with that at that point. There was no way we were going to take it down to no time left where you would still have to get a touchdown to go ahead. You've got to get that touchdown first before anything else. Our defense should have stopped Chicago on that last drive. We had those 2 big sacks. They were down to a 3rd and 19 at their own 21. That's a situation where you have to close out the game.
And they did not. In 2 plays, they got the first down and drove. And they kept driving all the way down, methodically driving it down. And I guess Bears fans are howling about Eberflus not running it one more time. Would that have made a difference?
Yes,
I think
yes, it would have. The Packers, Matt LaFleur should not have been calling those timeouts in the hope that he would get the ball back. He made mistakes essentially with every timeout that he made in the game, including that challenge. Packers are lucky that that the Bears did not take advantage of the timeouts called by Matt LaFleur close to the end of the game.
And it's not just getting closer, Jeff. I felt that they were going to at least run a play to get center. They were on that left hash mark to at least move over a little bit, was my suspicion. And when you're watching them just standing there, you're like, are they serious? Are they going to let this go down to 3?
Yeah, because it was 30, 40 seconds of clock. It was bizarre. Everybody just sort of stood around. It wasn't fourth down. So that was just,
right.
It was very odd. I guess, you know what? Don't apologize for the win. Take it. There were some questionable things that happened and some weird statistics. But you know what? It's Bear Week. We won. It's now 11 straight. So the longest run in history of this rivalry, 11 straight. So that's something.
Yeah, and 209 matchups. And another one that, we talked about too, to see, 52-15, I think, since the Favre era. Yeah. That's a lot of wins in our adulthood, considering what we saw in our childhood, right, in the 70s and the 80s. So it's great to see that Green Bay can continue that on. But this is one of those games where you just have to mention a name or an instance, and you know what the game is. The Chester Markle game. This is going to be the Carl Brooks game, or the just the tip game, Jeff, I think is the way you like it.
Much more appropriate, I think.
Yes. The final score again, 20-19. Now the Packers are 7-3 on the season. This is the 7th game that is a one possession game. There's only the 2 blowouts with Tennessee and Arizona that we had, and then our game against Detroit. We're on the losing end of that. And a lot of people like to take those one possession games and flip them around. If you did, Green Bay would be 4-6, I believe, or 5-5. Now I forget already. 5-5, maybe. Either way, it doesn't matter because we don't really do that. We take the schedule as it is. You get a win, you get to keep the win. It is 7-3. The interesting thing about this, the NFC North, Detroit on top at 9-1, Minnesota at 8-2, and Green Bay at 7-3. In any normal year, 7-3 is going to be a lot better than third place in the NFC North. The other thing that's interesting about that, you're the third place team in your division, and you're sitting in the 6th seed overall for playoff seeding. So Green Bay is really in a good spot here. And with 7 games left in the season, they get to stay in the driver's seat.
We're in the driver's seat until we play San Francisco. And that's where this game against San Francisco becomes a must win, because San Francisco wins this game as they want to do when they play the Packers over the last decade and a half. And all of a sudden, they're only a game behind us. They've got their team getting close to full strength, and they will have the tiebreaker advantage over the Packers. So this is where beating the 49ers, getting over that 49ers hump, is something that's important, not just psychologically, but it's important for playoff seeding and to make sure that we are going to stay in the driver's seat for the playoffs, because Washington has a very easy schedule. Even though Washington is currently the 7th seed, they've got an easy schedule the rest of the way. So I think that Washington is going to pass us if San Francisco beats us, and it will be very tough to catch up to Washington. And then you've got to catch up to San Francisco, a team that you would have lost to in that case. It's not a good situation. We really need to come out with a victory against those 49ers.
Do you realize it's been since October 15th of 2018 since the Packers have beat San Francisco and Green Bay? Hopefully we're due. That's not obviously the last time that the Packers beat the 49ers, but yeah, that was the last time in Green Bay. So it is I would say a must-win game, but this is it's really, really important to staying in our own division, not to mention the conference. Because, yeah, falling behind at this point is going to be problematic because we have mostly division games left, and those are not going to be easy either.
Division games on the road against Detroit and Minnesota as well.
Yeah, Neil, you mentioned Washington. They're at 7-4. They've yet to have their bye week. The good news is beyond that, the Rams, Seahawks, and 49ers currently are all 5-5. Now, we have the advantage over the Rams with that win. We need to keep that advantage by beating San Francisco and ideally Seattle then next month as well. But that is the task at hand, right? There's the albatross across this team's neck has been the San Francisco 49ers for the better part of the last 15 to 20 years. You know, you look at the statistics of this San Francisco team coming in, Neil, right? You can't trust them. This is a 5-5 team that has been without Christian McCaffrey for a majority of this season, and you just have to throw out the statistics from there as far as this game is concerned.
We have to throw out the offensive statistics, but I
Offense.
think that we can trust the defensive numbers. And unfortunately for the Packers, where again, we are a very middling team on defense statistically, San Francisco is good. Now, they're not all world good like they were last year, but they are sixth in defensive yards allowed per game at 302. Eighth against the pass, eighth against the run. So they're a very, very good team on defense with an offense that has this incredible number of playmakers. And yes, they haven't all come together yet, but you take McCaffrey, take Juwan Jennings, take Debo, right? They've got those weapons that can come together on offense, and you don't want to face a really stout defense where the other team can beat you with their offense as well. And so we've certainly got our work cut out for us. I would say the two advantages that we have against their defense. So although our defense only has 25 sacks in the season, San Francisco only has 26. So they are not a team that is going to rush the quarterback and overwhelm the quarterback. The other thing is that they are 25th in defensive third down percentage. They've allowed 43% of third downs to be converted. That was me finding some sort of stretch that could say that we might be able to overwhelm them on defense. But again, they're obviously an extremely good defensive team. Most of their numbers are excellent. So we're going to need a game plan that takes advantage of our strengths and then pits it against their weaknesses. But most importantly, let's play to our strengths, right? We can't have the situation where we have no completion to three of our top four receivers after the first half of the first quarter. We've got to be able to keep the other team guessing to make sure that we are going to be able to consistently move the ball down and take it into the end zone.
I want to see more defensive pressure. The defensive line, I mean, nobody's in the stats. I mean, it's like they almost didn't play. This straightforward rushing, they are not the second coming of Reggie White. They cannot throw the offensive linemen out of the way. It's not going to happen. They need to get a little more creative. They have to get more pressure on Purdy because otherwise he's not a mobile quarterback. Are they going to be able to get the pressure necessary to force him to make bad throws, or are they just not going to get pressure and just going to get picked apart?
Well, I would worry about that game plan a little bit because Purdy did have 5 rushes for 40 yards last week in their loss to Seattle. So although he's not a hypermobile quarterback, he's certainly somebody who's willing to run, and he will take advantage if he is not contained.
Right, and the containment is the key there. This is something we saw. I just, whatever they were trying against Chicago was too cute. It just wasn't going to work. So the front 4, 5, 6, however many are they're going to put up there, they really need to work that containment. The thing that I said this last week about Chicago too, if we're not going to cover the receivers, then they may as well send 8 or even 9 at the quarterback. And if you have, I don't know if you can do that with San Francisco with their receiving core, but I just want to see the defense be more aggressive.
That's what we've seen flashes of this from
Right.
Jeff Hafley, but it hasn't been consistent. We've seen it, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, we're back to this again. Or it's the
I want him to be more Fritz Shermer and less Joe Barry.
Yes,
That's
absolutely.
probably true for any defensive coordinator, right? I mean, those are two extremes, but you get the point. I mean, Shermer wasn't afraid to send people. Just send more people and don't send them running right at the linemen. Let's run some stunts. Let's get something that's going to work. Hey, Neil, you know, your brother's going to be happy about this. We actually have 2 weather reports here because we've got 2 games coming up. Let's take a look at Sunday. Sunday in Green Bay looks to be a nice, mild November day. During the daytime, going to be mostly cloudy with temperatures just tickling above 40 degrees, maybe 42 to 44 for the daytime high temperature. Now, remember, the kickoff is at 3:25 p.m. on Sunday. That sunset is just an hour after that. And it will cool off quickly once the sun goes down. Expect a good 10-degree drop in temperature before the end of that game on Sunday, but with no wind really to speak of, 3 to 4 mile an hour breeze. It should be a beautiful day for football in Green Bay on Sunday. The much too late forecast for Thanksgiving Day. Now, remember, that's a night game. That is a 7:20 kickoff. That means that it is going to cool off. We're looking at kind of mid to high 30s for high temperatures during the day. So it's going to be freezing and below freezing for that Thursday night, Thanksgiving night game when the Miami Dolphins come into town.
And that's the game where we have to take advantage of the weather and the Miami team not being used to colder weather. And the one thing that you have to look at with Miami is obviously, just like San Francisco, the offensive stats you can basically throw out because of the number of games that Tua missed. Their defense is still better than the Packers, ninth in yards per game at 308, basically the same against the pass and the run. They are actually even worse than San Francisco for sacks, though. They only have 17 sacks on the opposing quarterback all year. So you expect that there's not going to be a ton of pressure on Jordan Love, and he's going to be able to have chances. But obviously, if they're still 10th in yards per game in the pass, they're obviously doing the coverage that they need to do. So their defense is going to be decent. And in a cold weather game, obviously defense has a central role. And the question is, what are we going to see from this Miami offense? Obviously, on the year, Tua has missed most of the year, but in the most recent victory over Las Vegas this past week, Tua at 28 of 36, 288 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Now, it was against the Raiders, but that sounds like a very Tua-like performance that could cause a lot of problems for this Packers defense.
And again, a mobile quarterback. So Tua will run and is effective when he is running outside of the pocket. So again, are the Packers going to be able to contain Tua, hold him in the pocket, or at least spy just something, get contained, because otherwise it could be a long night.
The other thing about Miami is that even though their record is only 4-6, they're going to be a very motivated team for making the playoffs, because right now in the AFC, a 6-5 record is good enough for being the 7 seed. I will note that the Dolphins are only 1 game in the loss column behind those 6-5 Broncos. So they are not far out from the playoffs, despite having that 4-6 record. And I think that they are going to play with some sort of chip on their shoulder, because they feel like part of the season was taken away from them. They feel like they're going to be a contending team. They feel like they've been forgotten, and they're going to be doing everything to try to get themselves into that playoffs discussion and then try to make some noise in January.
Especially on a national game. Thanksgiving night. Everybody's watching it.
It'll be a great home viewing audience for sure. Thanksgiving in Green Bay, the second time that we'll get to host a Thanksgiving night game. I think that a lot of people, Neil, probably still have a sour taste in their mouths from the Brett Favre retirement game and the Bears loss. So I think fans want to come out and see this team perform a lot better. You know, you look at, Jeff, you talked about Miami coming into cold weather. In 1993, when Mark Clayton was part of the Packers squad, I was fortunate enough to be at Media Day. And I literally asked Mark Clayton that question about the weather. And he kind of gave me an, oh, come on, man, kind of answer. He said, we are professionals. The weather doesn't mean anything. He assured me of that. And so, you know, you have to look at that. And I to a degree, that makes sense. You know, I mean, these guys are professionals. They've played in cold weather in college. They play cold weather here and there. There's still a mental part of it. Your brain has to get yourself ready for it. So however you get ready for a football game, regardless of the weather, is next level thinking.
John, counterpoint. Did you see Miami playing in Kansas City last year?
Right?
And yes, that was much more severe weather. But I mean, listen, you know this, right? When winter starts, you know, it gets to be late fall and it's 30 degrees and you think, man, this is miserable. I can't stand this weather. And then you get used to the weather where it's been 10 degrees for a while, and 30 doesn't seem like it almost seems warm when it's 30 degrees, much less 40 degrees. And you've got the same thing. Me living on the East Coast, it's a lot colder where you guys live than it is where I live. And I've become a lot more of a weather wuss since living out in the Northeast than
Yes,
when I
you
used to
have.
live in Wisconsin. So it does play a role. Your body has a physical adaptation, and you're going to have to overcome that mentally. And yes, they are professional athletes, but to claim that there is no effect of the temperature, and I'm going to say specifically the temperature, something that you can actually get used to, in contrast to the Lions game where nobody's practicing in pouring rain, you do get used to the lower temperatures just by getting into your car, walking outdoors, going to do whatever you're doing around the city. You get used to what that weather is in a way that you don't if you're not living somewhere where you're getting to those cold temperatures.
Living in Minnesota, I am not a weather wuss.
Well, that's good. What I hope, though, is with these 2 home games and the chance of 2 times tailgating in the week, that we have a lot of people who are not going to leak out because of the weather. So yeah, both of these games are green package games, even with the Thanksgiving Day game. Yes, the Lot 1 tailgate party will be underway. So some times to keep in mind on the Sunday game against San Francisco. The parking lots will open up at 11:25 a.m. With the Thursday night game and Miami, the parking lots will open at 3:20 p.m. So there's plenty of time to get into town and get situated so that you're ready for tailgating, ready to get into the game. Wear layers, dress warm. Here's an interesting thing, though. On Sunday, the 24th, the Green Bay Packers are hosting a concert in the Lambeau Field parking lot, similar to the preseason concerts that they've done. No, this is game day at 11 a.m. The band Bella Kane is playing in the Green Bay Packers parking lot on the north side of the stadium there where they put the stage. Why? This is going to throw everything off. I mean, if I'm looking at this, I'm like, okay, do I now have to plan for 10,000 people being there earlier than expected when I drive up to get my parking spot? We know the parking lot when it's going to open, but to kind of get yourself acclimated, how many people are going to be there early for this concert? It's going to change the scope of tailgating. This is a bold move by the Packers to put a live concert in literally for 3 hours. It goes until 2 or 2:30 before kickoff on Sunday.
John, I always like it when you have traffic anxiety. It really sort of puts
Well,
a little spring in my step when John worries about
parking anxiety now.
Parking anxiety, yeah. This is crazy. Yeah, they're throwing the whole feng shui off of everything for me. I hope I get my parking spot is what it comes down to.
Do you have louder speakers such that your speakers at the Lot 1 tailgate will overcome the
not
noise of the
about my
concert?
speaker system, yes. We will be fine as far as that's concerned, but it's the foot traffic going around the game. Is this going to be a draw? Because, there's been a suspicion that the Packers just don't like the free and open tailgate parties that go on in their parking lots. They have been looking for a way to monetize tailgating for a long time. That's why the Tundra Village tailgate house is there. They've done different maneuvering with what they put in that concourse there as far as the pop-up pro shop and other kiosks that go on in there. The one game they had a pizza truck right next to us, and their generator ran the entire time. It was a very loud generator. We still drowned them out. But it's interesting what the team has been doing to try to change the scope of tailgating. And the thing is it's such an organic activity, and people come for that. Let it be. Let it happen, because it happens just the way it is. And the Packer fans and visiting fans love it the way it is.
John, I will be there for both of these games, and I'm very much looking forward to the organic tailgating experience or the organic fan experience, whether in Lot 1 or at Stadium View. I'm not going to do any of those corporate events. It's going to be all with the fans. Looking forward to it.
Make sure you bring your brother at least for one of those games. Tell him to dress warm. Make sure he's wearing pants as well. With that, let's take a look at Jeff has some San Francisco history for us. Jeff, take it away.
From 1995 through 2010, the Packers
didn't wear any pants.
The Packers held a 13-1 record over the San Francisco 49ers when you combine both regular season and playoff games. The only blemish on that was the 1998 playoff game, the Jerry Rice fumbled game. The Packers dominated the 49ers during this era, winning 3 straight playoff games against them in the mid-90s, catapulting Green Bay to postseason dominance and purging San Francisco from not only the playoffs, but also beginning the Super Bowl winning drought for the 49ers that continues to this day. So game number 1, 1995 divisional round, Packers 27, 49ers 17. The 49ers were Super Bowl champions in the prior year and had dreams of a repeat. The Packers took a 21-0 lead early in the game, never looked back. The victory sent the Packers to the NFC Championship game, their deepest playoff run since 1967. The 49ers had more first downs and yards, but also had 4 turnovers. Key stats: 49ers QB Steve Young threw the ball 65 times, which at the time was a record, but now stands as the 3rd most pass attempts in a playoff game, eclipsed by Ben Roethlisberger a few years back at 68. Another stat, Green Bay posted the only road victory by an NFC team in the divisional playoffs that decade.
Wow.
Some kind of interesting. Game number 2, 1996 divisional round, Packers 35, 49ers 14. We all remember this one. The Packers had only 210 yards, but managed to score 35 points. Why? The asshats. Well, they weren't the asshats at this point. And the Packers forced 5 turnovers, and San Francisco was unable to stop Desmond Howard. On the money turf for Lambeau Field, Howard returned the 49ers' first punt for 79 yards and a touchdown. And later in the first quarter, set up another Packers touchdown with a 46-yard punt return. With the victory, the Packers were set up to host their first ever NFC Championship game. Key stats here: Favre threw for only 76 yards. Dorsey Levens ran for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns on only 17 carries. Finally, game number 3, the 1997 NFC Championship. Packers 23, 49ers 10. Soggy field in San Francisco limited offensive production, but the Packers managed the sloppy conditions and won their second consecutive NFC title for their second straight Super Bowl appearance. Key stats: Packer defense. They held San Francisco to just 33 yards rushing on 19 carries, and the Packer offense did not turn the ball over in rainy and windy conditions.
Yeah, that 95 divisional round game to me is the game. We've said this many times before. It's the game that turned around the perception of who those Packers team was and the perception of what they could be. The fact that they could beat not only the defending Super Bowl champs, but to beat them in such a conclusive manner with how those turnovers played in the beginning of the game, how that scoring occurred to take that big lead. And then we just held on essentially for dear life as Mike Holmgren went conservative. But we had those big plays, and it was just like, oh, this team is different. This is not the Packers teams. You know, even if you take the teams from playoffs from previous years or going back into the 80s, this was not those teams. This is a team that had bigger aspirations. They were ready to play for that Super Bowl trophy. And I think that's the first time that we really believed. We hoped, we thought, but this is the first time that we actually believed.
Jeff, when I die, if anybody asks if I had any last words, the correct answer is yes. He said Jerry Rice fumbled.
That's the hill you're going to die on, isn't it, John?
Yes.
It's true.
Eventually, yes.
Yeah, I know.
With that, we have 2 games coming up. Again, San Francisco at home, Miami at home. We marked this on the schedule as 2 big games, must-win games or games that would be signature victories. I know looking ahead on the season, we made our predictions. Guys, do you have any updated picks? I picked Green Bay to win both of these games against San Francisco and Miami. I am going to stick with that. I'm taking the Packers on top at home in both matchups.
I had originally picked the Packers to lose to the 49ers, but I think the 49ers team has been really hurt by injuries over the course of the season. They don't have that continuity. They're missing some of their key playmakers, both on offense and defense. Brock Purdy just went on the injury report today with a sore shoulder. I just don't think this is San Francisco's year, but it is up to that Packers team to make sure that it is not San Francisco's year. And that's what I'm really looking forward to in this game. But I'm going to stick with the Packers. And again, I think that the Miami Dolphins are an excellent team. I can see how they can exploit us. But I think this is the Packers starting to make their drive. I think that we saw some of the pieces. If you take sort of the best pieces of those last couple of games, you can see how those could come together to make for a really good run towards and through the playoffs. And hopefully we'll see more of them together in a more cohesive manner in the upcoming weeks.
I have the Packers actually losing at home to San Francisco. I hope I'm wrong. I hope there's not a hangover from the Bears game. That's a big concern. And what I also hope is that somehow if the Packers they come out flat, they just come out not ready to play again, that if they end up losing, that Miami at the very least can be a wake-up call. And this is where they can start their run. If they, in fact, are not ready or something weird happens on Sunday against the 49ers, if they don't show up, if they're not prepared, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to hold it that they're going to lose and then come back with a vengeance, and that may be the springboard and maybe win out. I don't know. But in order to make the playoffs with this stacked NFC, not only North, but also the NFC, that there's not a lot of wiggle room here. And if they don't really get their shit together quickly here, they could fall behind.
And I'm looking forward to the fans coming out again Sunday the 24th and Thursday the 28th. 2 home games. Tailgating will be going on everywhere around Lambeau Field. Please stop by the Lot 1 tailgate party. Remember, it's going to be a full month before this team returns to a home game at Lambeau Field, and that's going to be Christmas Eve. So if you're worried about Thanksgiving being a holiday game, just remember the next one's a Monday night game on December 23rd after that. But weather should be relatively mild for November, but could be a decent week for deer hunters as well, right, Neil?
Absolutely.
If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit subscribe, leave a comment, as well as finding us online. We have added Blue Sky to our repertoire this week. You can find the GBC podcast at Green Bay Chat. That is all one word, Green Bay Chat. We are on Blue Sky, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. At Facebook, it is the GBC podcast Green Bay Chat. And you can follow us on any and all of those social media platforms. And may you fully appreciate the magnitude of your impending good fortune. Thanks for joining us.
Good night.
Night.